This is Zestology. It's the podcast all about energy, and I'm Tony Wrighton. As always, recording out and about in London, and I've just interviewed Donna Lancaster for the third time, I think, on Zestology. Today, talking about inner activism. So, a chat with Donna is always inspiring, but today, for some reason, we'd already met we'd been hanging out for a little bit, and we'd had a coffee, and I was thinking, I hope we've got enough to talk about, in the podcast, because we seem to have covered a lot of the topics already. And we went so deep, and she's so amazing. It's one of those podcasts where, and I mentioned this in the recording actually, I do think there's something about recording podcasts. Sometimes you can listen to a podcast and feel quite inspired afterwards. And I definitely feel like that myself after having listened to and chatted to Donna for 40 minutes or so. So I really hope you feel the same way. I've also sorted out my road rage issues, so that's good, isn't it? This podcast is brought to you by Ketoko MCT oil. If you head to Amazon and type in Ketoko, so that's keto with a KO on the end, you can get 10% off if you put the code Zestology in. It is pretty much the purest MCT oil on the market, 99.8% CA oil, which is the oil that helps you boost your ketones and makes you feel good and makes you have loads of energy. It's also in a glass non-drip bottle, and it's 100% coconut. A lot of these MCT oils are made out of palm oil, and you don't really want to be using palm oil for the environment or for your body. So it's Ketoko MCT oil, and enter the code Zestology at checkout. And look, I really hope you enjoy this podcast with Donna. Donna came over to ours, and we've got a lot of very noisy building work next door. So we've recorded it in the park. There's all sorts going on. There's 2 train lines going past. There's quite a few kind of families, dogs and children making noise in the background. But I hope it kind of sounds good because Donna's amazing. She runs the Bridge Retreat. She used to be very high up in the Hoffman process, which you may well have heard before, and she definitely knows her stuff. And when we started to talk about road rage, she cut through quite quickly what was going on with me, a little bit embarrassingly. I'm sure you'll enjoy that bit and everything else as well. Here she is, Donna Lancaster on Zestology. When people find you, I mean, you were saying, we were talking about the different ways that we tried to publicise both of our businesses in the past, and we both dabbled with PR. That didn't, it was, good, but kind of perhaps other methods have been more effective. But how do people find you? Is it mainly around grief?
No, it's mainly around people Googling for retreats, or obviously word of mouth is very powerful in terms of our PR, but mainly people come because they hit a point in life. I mean, usually it's the kind of midlifers that we get. Apparently 35 is considered midlife now, which is a bit scary for me. But
and me.
Yeah, and you. But 35 to 55 is our main age range. I might have said this to you before, but and I think it's people they tick the boxes a lot in life, car, job, relationship, etc., etc. They've done their partying or whatever, and then they get to a point in life and it's like, is that it? And they start to ask the sort of deeper questions of themselves, and so I think we get a lot of those people. So yes, we get people for bereavement or a divorce and separation or depression, anxiety and burnout and blah blah. Yeah. But we also get people that just have that kind of a sense of something more. And they are drawn to our work because they recognise that there's maybe stuff inside them holding them back from accessing whatever that something more is, their purpose or their connection to the bigger picture, whatever that means to the individual, really.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, isn't it? Especially when you consider that a lot of people settle down, inverted commas, a lot later than they used to. So you might have a life that on paper is kind of amazing. And by the way, maybe I should just set the scene. We're in a park surrounded by dogs.
Yes.
Next to a children's playground. There might be some trains going past. It's all going on here, isn't it? But it's a nice place to record, so it's quite nice.
It's really nice.
But yeah, so you might have the perfect life on paper, but increasingly people will settle down a little bit later, so they can start to think, okay, well, yeah, what is it all for at some point?
Yes, and I think as you go through life, you get to a point where you realise that.
Just pull her by the harness.
That some of the things that you've experienced in your life
she can't eat that.
Have. So I'm slightly distracted.
There's a dog eating something it shouldn't do.
Oh right, is that what it is? Okay.
She can't eat that. Pull her by the harness.
Yeah. So, where were we? Sorry, I've got my thread.
We just talk about people who kind of might go through life having the perfect life on paper.
Yes.
But then when they get to 35, the perfect life on paper might not involve a kind of a sense of purpose. I know you talk about service quite a bit, don't you?
Yeah. And I think what it is as well, Tony, is I'm a real believer in that the first half of life is often about outside-in living. So it's that thing of focusing on getting the career, which we need to, or the relationship that we want, or the family, or money, whatever is true. But those outside of us things that kind of build that phase of our life, and then you get to a point in life where those things are, you recognise that they might be nice, and like you say, on paper you've ticked all the boxes, but you start to become, if you are open to it, you start to be more interested in kind of going more in terms of inside out living, so more interested in how I feel and how I live and how I feel about myself, and what that then generates in my external reality. And I think that's what people kind of consciously or unconsciously are drawn to the bridge for, is that kind of, what Richard Rohr calls the second half of life, that kind of deeper meaning of life. And that's where we really focus on and I mean, I call that inner activism, as you know. So it's really like cleaning out your inner world so that you can really be in service to the world. And that service might be in the form of helping others, or it might just be being the best father you can be, or the best partner you can be. That is a service to the world. Because we need more good fathers, we need more people that are loving and kind and compassionate in the world. So that to me is service. It's not just sort of Gandhi style or Mother Teresa. That's one end of the spectrum, and which is wonderful, and we really encourage people to really consider how service can be part of your purpose, but it's also a service to the world to be kind.
I mean, obviously, being a new dad, I've had a lot of cause to consider how the first, talk about it's like a game of football, isn't it? It's a game of two halves, life.
Yes,
and the first half of life, it's very selfish. I mean, it's all based around receiving, isn't it? And obviously a baby can't do anything for himself, so you have to look after him. But even when you get into your teens and 20s, a lot of life, this is personally speaking, was about looking after myself and doing what I wanted to do.
Yes.
And all of a sudden it's not. It's about doing things for other people. But then I remember hearing some kind of stat which showed that the best way to feel good about yourself is proven to be doing something for other people.
Absolutely.
And even though I remember the first couple of weeks I kind of thought, oh God, am I going to have to change his nappy again? This is so boring. But now I quite enjoy it. You just kind of zone out, don't you? And this morning he was awake at 6 a.m. and I had to play with him. And if you're present, you don't try and do two things at once, and don't try and read your phone at the same time, it's fine.
It's also letting go of this, I think, like becoming a parent is, like we talked about before, it's like you have to let go of control to some degree, and surrender to what is, and what babies are really, really good at is the present moment. It's like, right now I've just pooed and I need you to change, and right now I'm tired, like little Stan when we were cuddling him earlier. It's like, I'm tired, my teeth hurt, fist in mouth, sort me out please. And babies are really good at teaching us presence. And I think you're absolutely right, the early years, I mean, they say the 20s are the narcissistic years, apologies to anyone in their 20s, but it really, some people are beyond that, but many people in their early teens and 20s, necessarily it is about me, getting the things that I want to build up my ego and my sense of self, which is a natural part of life. But there does come a point, whether it's becoming a parent or losing someone you love, or a significant relationship ending, or a depression arriving, where you just feel like, I mean, I always call it's like an opening. It's a possibility of building something a little bit deeper out of life. That, and I think service is part of that. It's part of like, it's part of, it's not altruistic. It makes you feel good, like you say, whether you're tending to your child or whether you're being kind to the person on the street with a smile. It's a two-way process, and that's, the world needs as much of that as possible.
As a parent, I've got all that to look forward to. A bolshy teen, and then a selfish 20-something.
Yes.
What about your dad? Think about me.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? It's like the first few years of being a parent, and they're obviously naturally merged. They need you for their very survival, and that can, if we're really honest, sometimes that can feel quite a burden and quite a responsibility, as lovely as it is. And then they very quickly, like that, they're kind of like a bit embarrassed by you. And then you really want to go back. That's the thing, where you have to be present, not have to, but it's an ideal situation to really be present to those stages of parenting, because they go so quick. And the thing that you were finding difficult, when it's gone, you're like, oh, love me. And they're like, Dad, please, you're embarrassing. Dad, I don't want to kiss you, Dad. Leave me with my mates. Yeah, so it all turns around pretty sharp.
So with the service or the purpose, it's quite a similar thing, isn't it? Service and purpose, is it?
I'm not sure if it is. I mean, purpose is really, like, for me, purpose is really finding what it is that really brings you more and more alive, that really is in alignment with your own truth and your own way of living. And for some people that is incorporates service, but in other people it's just like, I can't think of an example right now, but it might just feel like their purpose is
to be a good family member.
Be a good family member, or it might be that their purpose really feels that their purpose is to kind of make money and use it for good, hopefully. So I mean, I wouldn't say it's necessarily being in service is the same as having a purpose, but they can be aligned. Yeah.
So explain a bit more about, are you happy?
It's
just quite hot and there's a lot of dogs snuffling around.
It's just quite
it's all
sweet.
Part of the fun, isn't it?
So it's sweet because one sort of went between my legs, and I suddenly it's like, oh, what's that? It's just a bit of a shock.
Special surprise.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, interesting turn.
So with the service, how do you look at that on the bridge? Because I'm really interested in this, and the way that as your life progresses, you do start to think a little bit more about what you can offer other people and you can offer the world.
I mean, this is where the inner activism comes in, because I really believe that it's very hard to be effectively in service in the world if you haven't done your inner work. Because you can, for example, loads of people, when I worked with previously a lot of women, and they would be in all sorts of careers, nurses, carers, the sort of caring professions, social work, therapists, and they were really trying to do good in the world and trying to be in service, but they hadn't dealt with their own wounding. And so what that did is that it cost them dear. So they're not then effective, because they're self-sacrificing, so it's like all about the others and being in service to the world, exhausting themselves. And two is, if you don't do your inner work, Tony, you're always looking at the service you're giving through the lens of your own wounding, if that makes sense. So it's like if I didn't address my own childhood wounding when I was a social worker, which I didn't at the time, is I was always looking at the clients that came into my life through that lens of my own wounds. Right. And that doesn't make me clear. It means that the lenses are murky. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So I believe that inner activism is really about sorting your own shit out, basically, cleaning out your inner workings and really making sense, joining the dots, making sense of what's happened to you and making your peace with it as much as possible, so that you can then energize yourself, because carrying unprocessed stuff from the past is incredibly heavy and incredibly exhausting. So when you really process that, you can then start to really be in service in the world, but from a place of clarity rather than the murky lens.
And I think it's really interesting because, I mean, inner activism is quite a nice phrase. And obviously one of the ways people can do that is coming on one of your retreats, which are incidentally all sold out until the end of the year.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
So people have to book for next year. But I mean, obviously, to do that, I know it's not prohibitively expensive, but it's not cheap, is it, to come on the bridge?
No.
Are there are there or not shortcuts that people can take to do some inner activism without having to go on a retreat, or is it just is it possible? Or
yeah, of course. And I mean, it's not to say, I mean, by the way, just to say, in terms of the bridge, we have a bursary fund to support people who have, financially they would never be able to afford the amount it costs to do the work. But also, I also would say that lots of people see it as expensive who could easily afford that and would pay it, for example, on a good holiday.
Yes.
But there's just a perception, especially in the UK, around it being self-indulgent, and I see that very, very differently. I've spent a lot of money on my own healing, and I think it's the best money I've ever spent, because you can go on the holiday and still carry your same shit inside you. But
also, just on that, sorry to interrupt,
No,
but
please.
I would also say that when I've done courses, or when I've taken like a week or two off to either go on a retreat or a course, or kind of work on myself in some way, or learn, it's better than a holiday.
Totally.
Because you're taking time off work and you're meeting loads of people, you're doing some work, you're feeling great.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a roller coaster at times, it might be.
Yeah.
But it's better than a holiday because you come out of it feeling amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
So I've never regretted doing. I mean, certainly when I started learning NLP, that was probably the first time I started doing that. Taking 2 weeks off at a time to go and do an NLP course, but met loads of nice people, had a great time anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Still off from work.
Yeah, exactly.
So what other ways can people do a bit of inner activism? Starting with the podcast and maybe leading up to the bridge. Are there any books that you particularly recommend, or are there any other processes that people can do to kind of make a start?
Yeah, I mean, it depends where they're at in their life. I mean, I think it's, for some people, it's very hard to think about things like service, and think even stuff like subjects like gratitude, which is so key to living a kind of healthy, happy life. It's very hard to think about and consider those things when you're in pain, emotional pain. So sometimes, when you talk about being more grateful or being in service, people are like, bugger off, I'm hurting, and that's when we can get, it's almost like we're trying to just manage our lives because it's too painful to go there. So I think in terms of the sort of things people can do is being
just trying to stay afloat without
exactly
doing anything deeper than that.
Yeah, and that's what many people do, is they just manage, and we have like compensating behaviours and coping strategies that we really become experts at using. You only have to look at the drinking culture in our country, in many countries, and it's all a lot of that is about not just feeling good but feeling better, soothing something, suppressing something. And the same with drugs, and whatever your drug of choice is, whether it's shopping or MDMA, it's a lot of it is not just in enjoying it in a social capacity, but it's actually suppressing or soothing a painful state for many people.
Yeah. But I mean, don't we all have things that we love doing and we kind of immerse ourselves in, which could be, you could say, oh, well, like we're suppressing the pain or something, but you might just love it.
Yeah, of course. But
I might like, I don't know, reading books by a certain author and obsessively read all his books.
Yeah.
But is that actually anything to be read into apart from surface level? I'm just addicted to this author.
Yeah, it depends on the person, doesn't it? It's all about the individual.
Yeah.
But I believe, like, if you take drinking, there's nothing wrong with drinking per se, but you look how we use alcohol in this country, and it's all about getting absolutely shit-faced.
Yeah.
It's not about enjoying alcohol, not for everybody, but for many people, it's not about enjoying alcohol, it's about getting off their face. And I'm always curious when I work with people about what that's about. And obviously I work in a particular field, but most people, they recognise at some degree it's about masking something. And it works for a while for many people, and some people go to their graves, and if it works for you, good luck with that. But I'm really interested in living a kind of deeper life connected to a deeper meaning. I don't want to get too woo-woo, but
we'll allow you to be a tiny bit woo-woo on this podcast.
Tiny bit woo-woo.
But I mean, I suppose like inner activism, the phrases like this are a tiny bit woo-woo anyway, it's all right.
Is that woo-woo? I thought that would appeal to your left brain.
You come from a little bit more of a woo-woo place than me.
Yeah, this is true, whatever that means.
But you see, look, I think a lot of my mates think I'm pretty woo-woo, so I won't worry about it.
It's all relative, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So this activism and this inner activism, how can we start to take some steps to either do some of that work or reconnect with it?
So I think, like, if you talk about people that are sort of new to the idea of kind of working on themselves and haven't got the finances, for example, to get into therapy or to do a retreat like the Bridge, it's, of course, books will take you so far because they can give you that cognitive understanding. That's why I behave like this, because I had this experience, as an example. But that's only one way that you can, it's the first step, awareness, I think, for sort of change, if you like. But then I think people need to also bring in the body, because the body is the vessel which holds all our blocked emotions, and all the ailments that we experience are often emotionally related. It's not rocket science. And so I think anything that brings in the body into the equation is so key. You can sit in a therapist's chair for years and talk about what happened to you, but unless you stand up and actually process it fully through the body, I believe it's just going to remain from the neck up. So I think people, I think the first step for people is to really to do their reading, and if they want to get more aware and more of an understanding that it's not just them. That's the thing. It's like it's part of the human condition. We all experience suffering. We all experience heartbreak, and just to really start to join those dots and understand that some of your behaviour has links to the past is key, I think. And then it's also one of the things, Tony, I always recommend to people is to get feedback from trusted individuals in your life that not necessarily your family, because they're looking at you through a particular lens, but really trusted people where you can kind of go to them, like I do to my dearest friend. And she also happens to be German, so she has a very direct approach. And I say to her, can you give me some feedback? Can you tell me if you see any blind spots in terms of the way I'm functioning in my life right now? This is so key.
Wow.
So many people don't get feedback. So you're just blundering through life, and you have, for example, relationships, one disastrous relationship or another, or one argument after another, the same argument with the same person, just different variations, and they don't have any neutral feedback about how other people experience them. I think feedback is key.
So, I mean, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because we very rarely do that.
No.
But when someone like your German friend knows you so well, they're likely to be quite honest. I mean, I can think of plenty of bits of feedback I could give plenty of my friends, but they don't ask, and it'd be slightly rude to offer.
Yeah, exactly. I know, this is the thing, but it's a kind of a shift in mindset, because people see it as criticism, and if you've got like a poor sense of self, or if you're fragile confidence, it can feel like an attack. But that's why you have to be, and that's where a therapist is great, because you can, if the right therapist or coach, you can ask them, and they're coming from that very neutral perspective to give you kind, honest feedback. And I'm just lucky in my life that I've got people that they love me, and they also can see much more clearly than I can, because they're blind spots, what my blind spots are.
Right. So what kind of thing would your friend say to you?
Depends what's going on in my life.
Yeah, because it is hard, isn't it? I mean, it is hard not to be I mean, when I sit down with my boss at Sky, for example, and he says, you've been doing this on air and it's really annoying. You've been clearing your throat like this. And you kind of think, no, I haven't. Or maybe I have, but it's fine. And the hackles raise straight away, don't they? So it's quite hard not to take criticism personally.
Well, if you see it as criticism rather than feedback, definitely.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if you really want to know my answer to that question, Tony, it is that, and this is again a key part of inner activism, is the more you do your inner work, the less reactive you become. Because if you react to what is, it depends obviously how it's delivered, but what is genuine feedback, if you still are reacting to someone trying to give you honest, genuine feedback, I would really question how effective your inner activism or your therapy has been in that area, because reactivity is a clue that you have unfinished business with your past. So if we react to, for example, authority figures, I always believe that when people are highly reactive to authority figures...
I react to authority figures. Carry on. What happens when people are reactive?
It's usually related to parenting.
Yeah.
So it's usually related to unfinished business with our parents, because they were the first authority figures that we met. And so usually, if you had one or both parents that were too much in your face, too controlling, too in your business, or too much something, or not enough something, it can then mean that you get stuck like a rebellious teenager, and then every time you come into contact with anything that is you perceive as telling you what to do, the hackles go, how dare, and this is where people get, like at work, bosses are a classic authority figure. If it's a boss or a peer and they're telling you what to do, that's a clue, that phrase, by the way, and you get reactive to it. To me, it is often a clue that there's some unfinished historical business that you need to attend to.
That is fascinating. Just interrupting this podcast for one moment to tell you that it is brought to you by Kitoko MCT oil, extra pure 99.8% C8 MCT oil. Very pure, very good quality. This podcast is all about energy and vitality, and that's why we are brought to you by pretty much the best quality MCT oil on the market. If you find Kitoko MCT oil on Amazon and you enter the code Zestology, you will get 10% off. And it'd be a pleasure to give you 10% off for a little bit more energy. You put it into your bulletproof coffee. It's perfect for bulletproof coffee because it's completely tasteless. Or you can drizzle it on salads or food, or you can cook with it, or all the rest of it as well. So Kitoko MCT oil. There are other Kitoko products as well, including collagen and keto green powder. Only 2 grams of carbs, so that's good as well, isn't it? Search for Kitoko. You'll get 10% off if you enter the code Zestology for the MCT oil. And now back to the podcast. One of the things that I would love to be less reactive about is, and I think I'm a lot better than I was on this, but I notice, and I know a lot of people are like this, probably a lot of people are listening to this driving right now.
Oh, yes.
And I notice when someone drives right up my arse in a car, I just feel my heart rate starting to go. And it really annoys me. And part of me wants to really tell them. And I've got a baby on board sticker on the back, and you're still driving like that. And it really, rather than just say, okay, there are some knobheads out there, just pull over, that's why I would love to be a little bit less reactive in that. I mean, probably everyone, to a certain extent, it's not nice if someone's tailgating you, is it? But it doesn't have to emotionally make me feel different.
No, and it's that thing, like if I was your therapist, I would be curious about what you feel in those situations when you've got someone tailgating you and you've got your son in the car and everything, and it's usually around invasion and disrespect and someone not taking you seriously or not, and then it's like, follow the trail. Who did you feel invaded by in the past? Who did you feel on some level disrespected or disregarded or not seen and unsafe with? And it's kind of I always call it following the trail back to the past, because it's usually about this about history. That expression I think I've shared with you before, when it's hysterical, it's historical. So when you have a disproportionate, that's the thing, isn't it? Disproportionate. I used to be like that. Like someone would tailgate me or cut me up, and my rage. And it was like they might be oblivious, just a bit of a bumbling Sunday driver, or they might be a complete twat. But the rage that came out of me was it was hysterical, and that's when it showed me that it's not about the driver. It's about, for example, the fact that I felt that somebody didn't see me, and I felt completely unseen in my childhood. And it might seem like a big leap, but it's actually not for most people. When you join those dots, you kind of go, oh yeah, this is what it's really about.
This is really fascinating, and understanding that can go some way towards mitigating those reactions,
I think,
or reducing them.
Well, I think understanding is the first step. That's the awareness. When you kind of go, so say you're in your car and someone tailgates you and you've got your son, and like you say, of course you want to protect your son. It's like, get the hell away from me. But if there's this big reaction, huge reaction, when you then start, like the next time it happens, you'll probably remember this conversation, and you kind of go, oh yeah, who did I feel, oh yeah. And then it's that thing, what we're all looking for is that when we have an experience, and that pause before we choose to either respond and react. And what awareness can give you to some degree is that pause. You go, okay, I can choose to, be really like chasing this person and tailgating them and getting, into an unsafe situation for myself if your son's not on board. You could get into that kind of thing. Or I can choose to actually take a breath, know that this is also impacting me from an unhealed past wound, and let it go. And that is, awareness can be really helpful for that. But I believe, and that's just one perspective, but I believe you also have to do you have to use the body to release the emotions about what happened to you, that you felt invaded and you felt unseen and you felt unsafe, or whatever is true, so that you can then really, it's basically like the emotional child grows up. Because it's like in those moments we're like children. I'm not talking for you, I'm talking about when I used to get into road rage situations, and I would be like a rebellious 15-year-old, like, I'm going to chase them and I'm going to show them and I'm going, and it was just that girl in me, still 15, pushing against my dad. And like I say to people, it's like it's like a ghost, and when you push against a ghost, your hands go through. It's a red herring. You've got to really do your own stuff so that your own inner work, where you can really, something in you grows up.
And just you talk about the physical then. I mean, one of the ways that I've found physically really helps is tapping. It's not just thinking about this stuff.
Exactly.
It's a physical release. Is that the kind of thing you mean?
Yes, it's anything that brings in the body to the equation, so it doesn't just remain neck up.
Yeah.
So tapping is one way. Some people do all sorts of different body-based. Like we use a technique called shaking, which is based on.
I remember you telling me about
Peter Levine.
And I actually heard someone else talking about that recently.
Yeah.
When can I just paraphrase what you told me it was? It's when animals are under threat, and they kind of survive a fight or something like that, or they've been involved in kind of near death. They will shake it out.
Yes.
The emotion goes in with them, and then they just get on with it.
Yes, exactly. And this is, this isn't airy-fairy woohoo stuff. This is robustly evidence-based approach to healing, especially around especially around trauma. The work of Dr. Peter Levine, he created a therapy called somatic experiencing. I went to a trauma conference in London recently with our mate Gabor.
Oh wow. Gabor
Mate. And in this,
so is he speaking at the conference?
He was speaking for the whole day.
The whole day.
And then the second day
we had, been brilliant.
It was absolutely brilliant. And the next day we had a whole range of different speakers talking about trauma, and many of them talked about the essential aspect of healing, about bringing in the body, and also about variations on shaking. And some guy, I can't remember his name, but some top psychologist or psychotherapist, I can't remember, but he showed the footage, which I would encourage you to Google, and your listeners, is of a polar bear. And it's a National Geographic footage. Have you seen it?
No.
When this polar bear gets tranquilised because they need to examine it or whatever, and then they film it afterwards as it comes out of the trauma of being chased and then tranquilised.
Yeah.
And it literally goes into this massive, it looks like it's having a fit, and it's basically shaking the whole of its body to release all this excess adrenaline, cortisol, everything that's flooded through its system of being so stressed.
Right.
And then it gets up and bumbles off.
Yeah.
And there's various animal footage like this on the net, which is fascinating to see how that they don't get traumatized because they know what to do with their bodies. And we as human beings, we think we're so clever that you just have to do it from the neck up, and actually, we need to bring in the body.
That's it's very interesting in the context of the last couple of months of fairly stressful early baby parenting. And we've both joined a gym, and we kind of tag team it in terms to go to the gym. And I not only see it in me, I see it in Faith as well. Go to the gym, all stressed out, not feeling great, in your head, come back, mood completely lifted every single time.
Every single time.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
Simple as that, really.
It is as simple as that, and it's like, that's exactly what you say. That's another way you can do the kind of emotional release through your body, is through exercise, but not just exercise for exercise sake. You have to, if you in terms of the work I do, I really encourage people to have a focus for their exercise. So if you go to the gym with your frustrations or a big reaction to something, but you really take that into the workout session. That's why I love boxing. I can really literally box on people that have pissed me off,
right?
Or, and it's really helpful. And then it just dissipates.
Yeah.
You just can let things go. And like you say, complete mood alterer. I've never regretted going to the gym, and I go at 7 a.m. in the morning. And so almost every morning, my alarm goes off at 6:15, and I think, oh, and then I never ever have regretted it once I've pushed myself to go.
Yeah. Even during it, it's not that much fun sometimes, is it? But afterwards, it feels great.
Yeah, you get all the feel-good chemicals flooding your body.
Yeah.
And it's, we are not meant to be sedentary. You know this, and we're all sitting more and more and more, and we need to move. And that is really, really helpful to I think the ideal kind of approach to inner activism, if you like, is a combination, which is what we offer on the bridge, which is a combination of the cognitive, understanding more and more what happened to us, along with the body-based release, the cathartic release. And it's those two things, and people can do it on a retreat, or they can do it themselves with the reading and the feedback and the understanding more and more, and then the going to the gym but with a focus, or the tapping, or whatever is works for you on a physical level.
I had a whole list of topics we've not even had a time to look at, but I'm glad we covered road rage, because I'm definitely going to think of all that next time. What is, I've asked you this before, but what is one book that you would recommend, and one tip for living with more energy and vitality?
So one book and one tip?
Yeah.
Okay, so the book that I thought about this, as you know, because I've been a guest now for a couple of times. I'm very honoured.
Oh, good.
Time.
Well, I'm very honoured.
I'm very honoured that you'd ask me back.
Nice. Now it's just a nice chance for a catch-up, really, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And
although there is something about the podcast recording itself. Sometimes I think, because we've been hanging out for a couple of hours already, I thought, I hope we've still got enough to talk about. But not only have we've kind of gone a bit deeper now we've been recording the podcast, which is nice.
No, really nice. And we could talk for hours, you and I, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely.
But so the book that I would recommend is a bit left field, but and it depends on who your listeners are. But there's a book by Eve Ensler. And Eve Ensler is I don't know if you know, she's a feminist and activist and an author, award-winning playwright. She wrote the Vagina Monologues.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and she's
very famous.
Yeah, very famous. So she's quite an incredible woman, and she wrote a book called, well, there's two books actually. I'm going to be greedy. One's called In the Body of the World, which is about her journey with cancer and how she recognised that nothing that happened inside her body wasn't related to the toxicity that's happening in the world, which links to my inner activism theory. So that's a very powerful book to get that kind of bigger picture around what's happening here in the individual and what's happening to the collective. But the other book, which I read recently, which blew me away, and like I said, it's not for everybody and it's quite a hard read, Tony, is a book called The Apology. And Eve Ensler wrote this book because she was abused by her father, and he never apologised. He never even admitted what he'd done to her, and never apologised, and he's been dead for years. And she realised that she had been waiting all her life for this apology, and it was never going to come. So she decided to write it for herself, the imagined apology of this man to her about what he did to her. And she said it completely freed her. And so she works a lot in the Congo, and she works with women that have had horrendous experiences through rape and all terrible things, traumatized women, and they've started to incorporate that in their own healing, where they write the imagined letter of apology that they would have received from this person if they could have given it to them, and it's had very powerful effects on them. And the reason I really recommend this is because on the bridge, one of the things that we believe is that it's very hard for people to emotionally grow up, because there's a child in us all that wants to be apologised to for what happened to us, for whether our dad died or whether our mum was too much in our face or whatever is true, that the child part of us that is driving the car and reacting in road rage is actually unconsciously waiting for that apology. And that's what we do on the bridge, is we offer an imagined but heartfelt apology to people, Tony, so that the child in them sort of, you see it in people, that they breathe this sigh of relief, and it's like they can finally let go of what they were holding on to, and that's where forgiveness can really happen.
Wow.
Sorry, that was a long-winded answer.
No, that was good. Yeah.
And my top tip, if I can squeeze that in, is what we wanted to talk about but ran out of time, is gratitude. Yeah. So really, again, if you want to Google, the evidence is in, it's not out, around the power of gratitude. Even with the most negative, pessimistic, depressed people, if if you do a gratitude list in the evening, 3 to 5 things different every day that you really heartfelt feel, not just, oh, thank you for the trees, thank you for the sun, like really feel them, whether it is that amazing bacon sandwich you had for breakfast, but you really connect to it. It completely shifts in the brain. People, they've done studies around long-term pessimists, and it can completely transform into really looking at life through a much more positive perspective, which of course positivity is not only contagious, but it gives us more energy and vitality. So just being grateful, but really meaning it, not a token gesture. Gratitude is everything. I always say that when I stopped feeling entitled to anything and I started feeling grateful for everything, that's when my life really changed. I'm grateful. We're alive. Look at us.
Well, we'll have to talk more about gratitude next time.
Yeah, please.
And it's just been occurring to me that inner activism, one of the ways that people do change now, and I know this because it's my own experience, is listening to podcasts.
Yes.
Sometimes you can listen to someone talk for an hour, and that's the great benefit of my job. I get to meet people like you and feel inspired, but you do feel different.
Yes, it's really true.
I saw a stat today that more than 90% of people listen to podcasts alone. And it is a very good way to change your mood, inspire you, change your state.
Yes. It's so
I'm,
true.
I'm sure a lot of people will feel that listening to this one. So
let's
thanks.
hope so. You're so welcome.
Yeah.
Such a joy.
Oh, definitely. So where can people find out more about you and about the bridge as well?
So obviously we have a website, thebridgeretreat.com, and then we have an Instagram at the Bridge Retreat, and also they can follow me at Donna Lancs, Lancs. So that's on Instagram. I have a Facebook page as well, but I don't know what it is.
Right. I like your Instagram. It's good.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
There's occasional kind of very emotional posts.
Yes, there are. Yeah,
no, it's good.
Because also I'm really in the business of authentic living, and I really want to. That's why sometimes I post pictures, and I think people are more and more, moving away from that sort of ridiculous kind of everyone's happy and everyone's clappy. It's like just. This is what it looks like to feel shit, and that's all right to share that with people.
That's it for this podcast. Thank you to Donna. I'm still walking around West London. If you would like to know more about Donna, do check out the Bridge Retreat, and it's fantastic that she's booked up until the end of the year. But I know when people listened to her last time on Zestology, they did book on the retreat, and so you might have to kind of get in there quick if you want to do the same thing. And if you'd like to get a decent MCT oil, then you can head to Amazon, because this podcast is brought to you by Kitoko MCT oil. And use the code Zestology for 10% off for a bit of keto living, or just boost your energy levels, because energy is everything, right? As always, thanks for listening to Zestology. There is the 3 Zesty Things newsletter, which is a kind of complement to this podcast, and this week's issue is all about sleep, different tips that I've gleaned from various Zestology guests and my own Oura Ring research and everything else around sleep. It goes out every Monday morning, and if you head to TonyWrighton.com, you can get the 3 Zesty Things newsletter. Kind of complements the podcast, and it's different stuff. It's stuff that you haven't necessarily heard in the podcast as well, and it goes out every Monday morning. It's all about energy anyway, and vitality. So yeah, you can head to TonyWrighton.com. It's very self-explanatory once you get there on how to sign up. And have a great day. Have a great week. Have a zesty time of it, and I will see you next week for another Zestology podcast.